It's no secret that we here at Team Pizza love a good way forward game. Note, all of them. So when you tell us that the guys behind Shantae are working on a top-down adventure game that features the colorful cast and wacky, self-aware humor of Adventure Time for only $40, we start paying attention. But that only settles whether or not we'll actually be giving it a look amongst the 10 billion other games that came out on the 18th. This is a review after all, which means we still need to be objective about this. So, in an objective sense, does this modern-day tribute to retro Zelda strike a chord? Or should it have stayed a secret to everybody? Well, for starters, let's address the elephant in the room, the one that plagues every game based on an IP. Do you have to be a fan of the source material to follow what's going on in the game? Actually, no. Sure, fan-favorite characters do pop in from time to time, but the story of the Nameless Kingdom is a pretty self-contained one that's easy to follow regardless of experience. Hell, I barely know anything about this show, and I still found myself falling in love with this cast. Its willingness to poke fun at video game tropes didn't hurt either. In fact, some of these jokes work even better if they catch you off guard. Without spoilers, complete the trade quest up to the Ice King and you'll quickly realize just how meta this show can get. And yes, I did just say this game has a trade quest. Secret of the Nameless Kingdom unabashedly wears its influences on its sleeve. This is a Zelda game through and through, from the way your sword swings to the enemies you'll face, to the fact that the start of your adventure is basically the opening to Link to the Past. Right down how do you sneak into the castle by going through a secret passage hidden under a bush, in the rain. There's an entire sequence where you're tasked with transporting a love letter between two elderly characters hiding in caves. There's a building whose sole purpose is to break as many pots as you can within a time limit. The game actively makes fun of you for trying to bottle a fairy. They went there. There's more Zelda fan service here than Hyrule Warriors, and if that's your thing, you're gonna love every second of it. So, Nameless Kingdom can make a good joke, but how good of a top-down adventure game is it in its own right? Well, I'll say this, you definitely get that same feeling of discovery when wandering the overworld, trying to memorize where all the barriers are so you can come back to them later with the right power-ups. But it's the act of getting those power-ups where the problem lies. The dungeons in Nameless Kingdom are a nightmare, and not just in the literal sense. They feel long, mostly due to how confusing they can get. Especially in the second one, there are plenty of intersecting paths, giving you a plethora of options on which direction to go at any given time, but only one that will result in actual progress. I've gotten downright lost on more than one occasion, forcing me to find whatever walkthrough I could to work out the way forward. There it is again. But even if you've got better mental bearings than I do, these places more than outstay their welcome. They're just way too big to stay interesting, not introducing enough new mechanics to keep you engaged in the puzzle solving. And that's doubly true when you're trekking through rooms 3, 4, even 5 times over, trying to figure out what order you need to do things in. And on top of that, some of the most important yet esoteric mechanics in the game do not bother to explain themselves to you. Take this room for instance. You're locked in with nothing but 2 respawning dynamite enemies and a staircase separating them from the wall you need to blow up. All that you've gotten so far in terms of new tools in this dungeon is a move that lets you slap hand-shaped switches and push enemies back. So, what do? Slapping these guys doesn't do anything, and trying to carry them up the stairs once they're knocked out is useless. You have to figure out that using the slap after they're knocked over stuffs them in one of your baggies. And that number next to your newly caught explosive, that's not how many of your bags are occupied by bombs like I thought it was. That's how many are in this particular bag, which can be filled with up to 9 each, by the way. A fact I didn't discover until hours later by total accident, long after I had spent many trips going back and forth between this dungeon and the overworld to restock. Really, the Zelda influence is both a blessing and a curse here, because in cases like the numerous gags, the trade quest, and yes, knowing how most of the puzzles work, the game largely assumes that you've been through this kind of thing before. Nobody likes tutorials, I get it, but there's a fine line between too much hand-holding and not enough. This is not nearly enough. Every game is someone's first, and if this truly is your first game of this kind, which very well might be the case for a good chunk of Adventure Time's core demographic, you are gonna be downright stumped, even more so than I was. Which plays into my next point. Nameless Kingdom is hard. Not even counting the confusing dungeon layouts and general lack of context clues, this is one of the more difficult games in its genre that I've ever played, so come prepared to die quite a few times on your quest to rescue the 3 princesses. I'm gonna be straight with you guys. There's a good core here, but it's really rough around the edges. This game was made by Zelda aficionados for Zelda aficionados in far more ways than one, so if you don't fall into that circle, I imagine you're gonna get a lot less out of it than someone who does. If you're willing to look past that, though, it's not a bad game by any means. It has flaws, sure, but also some pretty wild high points as well. If that sounds like it's worth the headache for you, go ahead and give it a shot. And if you don't like it, hey, you're only out $40. $30 if you buy the 3DS version, and it's even available through Redbox if you're not 100% sold. Either way, sharpen your grass sword, because I think you know what time it is.
Top down